Welcome to Cuke Audio Podcast, a presentation of Cuke Archives, preserving the legacy of Shunryu Suzuki and those whose paths crossed his. And anything else that comes to mind. My name is David Chadwick, and I'm the Poobah of Cuke Archives. I'm speaking to you from Sanur with Doggett Bandita and Feline Cuchita at my side. Dear Katrinka is in America, and no plane's gonna land here with her for a while. So I appreciate your being here to keep me company in my self-isolation. Before we go any further, I must thank our sponsor. This program is brought to you through the generous support of you, our dear listeners. We are most grateful. Thank you. May all beings be happy. May all beings be healthy. May all beings be free from harm. May all beings love life. May all beings awaken. We, of course, wonder what the actual numbers are. So let's begin this session with some zazen, or meditation, if you prefer to call it that. Or you can do vipassana, or walking meditation, chanting, whatever you want. Let's all do it together, and we don't need Zoom to do it. All we have to do is hit pause. So let's hit pause, and then let's say meditate for an hour, or however long you want, because as Einstein said, time is an illusion, just a very convincing one. So we will miraculously, no matter how long each of us meditates, arrive back at the exact same instant. Okay, here we go. Oh, that was good. We should practice meditation together at the beginning of every podcast. Here we are at 3 minutes and 9 seconds into the fourth podcast, and it's time for the table of contents. Next is life in Bali, with a brief report on a purple people, capped with a shocking message from Sheb Wooley. At 10 minutes and 30 seconds, we have a guest, Eugene Bush, teacher of the Arcata Zen Group in California, with a brief novel approach to hand washing. At 21 minutes and 20 seconds, I begin to read Chapter 1 of Crooked Cucumber, the life and Zen teaching of Shunryu Suzuki. At 1 hour, 1 minute, 20 seconds, comments on Chapter 1. At 1 hour, 34 minutes, and 30 seconds, we listen to a bird out back, which segues into the dramatic closing, which vanishes into nothingness at 1 hour and 38 minutes. Enjoy. Kadek is going to be here in a little bit, bring food and coconut water and clean up, and we're going to talk about her making some muesli. We make great muesli. Katrinka's muesli. It's extremely popular with as a gift, and popular with people who like muesli. And, Kadek's husband is out of work. He's a driver. He was the main breadwinner of the family, and what she gets from here, and I'm paying her extra, and she's working less, but that doesn't matter. And she worked for some people down the street, and at some point they might tell her not to come because they're worried about the virus. But anyway, she's going to come today, and then she's going to notice I have these abrasions on my arm where the skin was torn off, and it's all pink and red. Obviously, another accident. What I did was I was walking out the back door into our tiny, tiny little courtyard back there, which I do every morning. First thing, I take any compost out there, and I look for any of Bondi's pupettes. And so I have some sandals right there to wear out so I don't get my feet dirty and bring it back in. And I didn't put them on carefully. I was just sort of putting them on as I walked out, so they're sticking halfway out. And then I sort of tripped over it, and I fall forward, right? I didn't fall down, but my arm, pushed really hard by this little latch thing that sticks out on the door. So she'll see that. Now, I have hand sanitizer right around here, naturally, nowadays, and made our own hand sanitizer with aloe vera and alcohol. So I put that on it. But she'll see it, and she'll want to make sure it's clean and maybe put something else on it and ask me, don't I want a Band-Aid? And I'll say no. So she frequently comes here to find a new wound on me. The reason is, and Yoman pointed this out, is that my skin has gotten thinner, especially on the arms and hands. I had Bondi pulling on a leash tour, and it was rolling over the top of my hand. It just pulled off all this skin. That was months ago. It comes back real quick, and I get these purple marks. Sometimes, like the whole back of my hand will be red and purple. People go, my God, what's wrong with you? And I'd say, it'll go away. And, I bruise easy. I've known women that bruised easy before when they were younger. It may be men, too. But I lived with a woman who bruised easy. But what I've discovered, I haven't read about it, I haven't looked it up, I haven't researched it, is that as I get older, at least my arm and hand skin gets thinner. And then I remember hearing about old man smell. I guess in some media thing I was watching or something. And I thought, wow, maybe as our skin gets thinner, it allows different odors to waft up from our body. And so, God, this social distancing, that's good. I don't want to get too close to people and gross them out. Well, I guess older people get a little more purple, and because the skin gets thinner, at least a lot of purple spots, but maybe a little more purple. And, I'll find myself bleeding somewhere, especially on my arms, but sometimes in my legs. I won't know what I did to make that happen. I think Kadek will get concerned when she sees that there's some blood spots on the sheets. And I'll say, no, that's just from my arm here. I woke up this morning and, I'd probably scratched it unconsciously at night. I never thought of it this way before. But I think I'm becoming a purple person. I now see a hidden meaning in a song from the 50s called, what was it called? The Purple People Eater? Now I understand what the Purple People Eaters were. It was a Purple People Eater. It was a big song, like in 58. Very poppy, Wasn't one of the cool hip songs that came out. But I thought the People Eater was purple, but no. It was a people eater that ate purple people. And maybe it was here for population control. And so I'm on the lookout for purple people eaters, not just the virus. In fact, the purple people eaters might have brought the virus.
Well, I saw the thing coming out of the sky. It had a one long horn and one big eye. I commenced shaking and I said, ooh-wee. It looked like a purple people eater to me. It was a one-eyed, one-horn, flying purple people eater. One-eyed, one-horn, flying purple people eater. A one-eyed, one-horn, flying purple people eater. Sure looks strange to me.
I'm going to make a call now to Eugene Bush, the head teacher of the Arcata Zen Center, Rinzhinji, Forest Heart Temple.
Hello, this must be David. Hi, this is Gene.
Hi, Gene. How you doing?
I'm good.
All right, good. So, Mark Bringle sent me a very nice review of these podcasts. And, he mentioned the Arcata Zen Group. And so because of one particular thing he said, I was motivated to get in touch with you. But first, just tell me a little bit about yourself and how you ended up there.
I think I mentioned to you in an email that I'm one of Catherine Thanis' heirs.
Yeah.
I divide my time between Santa Cruz and Arcata.
Oh.
So I'm in both places, actually.
Oh.
So in Santa Cruz is Central Coast, California, and Arcata is North Coast, California, about 350 miles away.
Right,
so
right.
I divide my time. And I don't know exactly how it happened, but I retired from teaching public school for many years, 37 years.
Oh, goodness.
And in 2013, and I was ready to continue working. I just didn't want to work in the school system anymore. And right around that time, I became aware that Arcata was looking for a teacher. And I met them, and it seemed to be a match. And so I've been going there ever since 2013.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. And those are both great towns. And I loved Catherine. She was wonderful.
Catherine was an amazing teacher.
Yeah.
And, Arcata was established by Maylie Scott, who was a Dharma heir of Sojun Mel Weitzman.
Right. I was sorry when she passed away to the next Bardo.
Yes.
Yeah.
Too soon.
Yeah. What Mark told me was that, this is great, that you had suggested to the students there at the Arcata Zen Group that rather than singing happy birthday to make sure that they're washing their hands for 20 seconds, that they chant the Inmei Juku Kanangyo. And that really got to me because I really don't like happy birthday. And
I got you. It gets old, doesn't it?
Yeah. I was the host at Zen Center's restaurant Greens for the first couple of years. And, it seated 125 people. And it was a magnet for people coming for birthdays. So for 2 years,
of course,
I heard people singing happy birthday and, going and many more. And waiters joining them. Oh, I wouldn't do it. There are restaurants where the staff will not join in on happy birthday. And I was telling my friend Sarah that and about how I was going to call you. And she said, oh, it's funny you'd say that because I just read that, and she's from England. I just read that that's what they're suggesting people in England do. And she and I both agreed that whereas Happy Birthday might be the most successful song of all time, we've heard it enough. So anyway, I was wondering if maybe you might need to wash your Pardon me.
Yeah, I can do that. I'll do that for you, David. And I'll just describe to you how I came across this 20-second business.
Yeah.
So I often, when I'm running or walking or doing something that is rhythmic, I often kind of unconsciously, I would say, recite the Enmejuku Kanangyo, the Kanzeon chant, to myself. So I had just come in from running, and as you know, I'm imagining you do as well, come in from outdoors and wash your hands. So I had just come in from running, and the chant was still kind of running through my mind, kind of rambling in. And I took off my watch and set it by the sink and began to wash my hands. And just kind of by happenstance, by happy chance, noticed that it took 20 seconds. So it was just kind of this random discovery. And then, as Mark may have told you, I offered a teaching about Kanzeon and the need for compassion at this time. And so I paired that Dharma talk with this suggestion for the 20 seconds, new habit, 20 seconds.
Yes, that's great.
Anyway, sure, I'll go to my bathroom and wash my hands.
That's great. Well, it's really most fortunate we happened to catch you at a moment when you needed to wash your hands.
Absolutely. So I'm going to put soap on my hands and moisten everything. Enmejuku kanangyo. And now I'm turning off the water because, this is California.
Right.
Kanzeon namu butsuyo butsu inyo butsu en buposo en joraku ga jochonen kanzeon bonen kanzeon nennen yushinji nennen fuishin. Rinse my hands. Try them to clean opening our compassionate hearts. There you go.
That was wonderful. I was very moved, actually. Can you give a little teisho on Kanzeon and the Enmejuku Kanangyo?
I feel that this is for Avalokiteshvara, of course, pronounced in the Japanese syllables Kanzeon or Kanon. And she is an archetypal figure, I feel, and that archetype evokes our own boundless compassion. So it's not this distant figure, it is the opening of our own compassionate heart. And in statuary, she's often depicted with 10,000 arms and hands, or many arms and hands. Each one sometimes with an eye in it, and this indicates her capacity to perceive widely and perceive deeply, and with that depth of perception, find the appropriate response to whatever the conditions are that are arising. So when I personally turn to her, and I encourage others to turn to her, it's like, can we turn toward the deep perception of the world right now? Because what's needed is noticing the absence of things that are normally done and the presence of a new practice, I would say it seems worldwide, and that is only the activity of responding to the circumstances as they arise. And so what better way to meet these circumstances than with this open and compassionate heart?
Wow.
I don't know if that gave you what you were looking for.
Oh, yeah. That's beautiful.
There's a start.
Yeah, that's well said. That's wonderful. I really appreciate it.
And the line toward the end there of the Enmejuku Kanjo, that is Chonen Kanzeon, Bonen Kanzeon, that is translatable as, in the morning, my first impulse of mind and heart is compassion. And then in the evening, my last impulse of mind and heart is compassion. So then it moves into present moment awareness. That's the nen Jushin ki part. So, it's really an evocation of all of practice.
That's well said. I really appreciate that, and I appreciate your joining us. And I hope that everything goes well and everybody's happy and healthy and free from harm in Arcata and Santa Cruz and extending into the entire cosmos.
That's it, David. Thank you very much for the opportunity to talk.
Yeah, thank you. And I look forward to meeting you someday.
Yes, we met many, many years ago through Catherine Thanis.
Oh, is that right?
Yes, and somewhere in the early 80s, I'm guessing.
Oh, wow.
Anyway, we met many years ago, and I would look forward to re-meeting you anytime.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much, Eugene.
All right, David.
All right. Take care.
Best of health to you.
Yeah, you too. Bye-bye.
Bye for now.
Crooked Cucumber, The Life and Zen Teaching of Shunryu Suzuki. Part 1, Japan, 1904 to 1959. Chapter 1, Childhood, 1904 to 1916. Our mind should be free from traces of the past, just like the flowers of spring. High winds blew across the green hillside, driving rain into the storm doors of Shoganji, an obscure Japanese country temple, when on May 18th, 1904, Yone Suzuki gave birth to a baby boy. Her husband, Sogaku, the priest of the temple, gave his firstborn son the name Shunryu, using the written characters for excellent and emerging, a rather formal Buddhist name full of high expectations. It was the year of the dragon, the 37th year of the reign of Emperor Meiji. Fierce battles were being fought on the plains of Manchuria between Imperial Japan and Tsarist Russia, and Sogaku was preparing the main hall of Shoganji for yet another soldier's funeral, as Shunryu had his first taste of life in a small tatami room. Cherry trees interspersed with shrub bamboo lined the steep road up to Shoganji, a small 400-year-old temple on a hill above the village of Shimokichisawa, on the edge of the city of Hiratsuka in Kanagawa Prefecture. From the temple Ohaka, a peaceful sanctuary where the ashes of local families and prior abbots were interred below weather-worn stone markers, there was a commanding view of Sagami Bay, which opens into the Pacific with Tokyo Bay to the northeast. Kamakura, the ancient political and Buddhist center, lay at the edge of the green and blue vista. Shoganji's handsome grass-thatched roof could be seen from afar, surrounded by forested mountainsides just beyond the smoke of Yokohama's burgeoning industries. As a child, Shunryu Suzuki was called Toshitaka, Toshi for short. Toshitaka is the old Japanese way of pronouncing the characters that make up Shunryu, with a softer and more casual feeling. Toshi grew up playing around the temple with his older half-brother from his mother's first marriage, Yoshinami Shima. When he was 3, his sister Tori was born, and at 6 he acquired another sister, Aiko. Toshi was small, yet strong, eager to learn, impatient to do things before he was old enough, sensitive and kind, but prone to quick bursts of anger. And he couldn't keep track of anything, schoolwork and books, caps and coins, whatever it was. He'd leave it at home or at school, wherever he wasn't. Toshi began his 6 years of compulsory education in April 1910 when he was almost 6. It was at school that he became aware that his family was uncommonly poor. Most people wore zori, straw sandals with a dividing cord between the first 2 toes. When the cord broke on one, children would throw away both. Toshi would take the good ones home and make new pairs. Unwilling to spend money on a set of hair clippers, his father would shave Toshi's head like his own. All the boys at school had short clipped hair, but not shaved heads. Lean and proper, approaching 50, Butsumon Sogaku Suzuki was old to be having his first son. Priests of the Soto school of Zen had only begun taking wives a few decades earlier, encouraged strongly by a government bent on diminishing the power of the Buddhist clergy. The practice was easing in, though it was not permitted by the Soto school. At first, families had to live outside the temples, apart from the priests. But by 1904, it was beginning to be acceptable for families to live in. There were no family quarters at Shoganji. They slept in the Buddha hall, the room used for daily services, and shared their home every day with neighbors and temple members. Shoganji didn't have a large or a wealthy danka, the community of supporting members, nor did it have extensive temple lands that would bring in a sizable rice tax. Sogaku and Yone had to augment the temple income with outside work and practice meticulous thrift. Yone was short and plain, with the tough look of a hard worker and a softness that had withstood the rigors of a difficult life. She taught teenage girls at a vocational high school how to make clothing. She knew a good deal about sewing and would study till late at night from books to make herself a better teacher. As her reputation grew, she began sewing classes at the temple, eventually acquiring many students. Yone was the stricter of the parents. Her children were taught to be proper and respectful and to do well at school so as to make a good impression on temple guests and not to bring shame to the family. People came to Shoganji for seasonal Buddhist holidays, for funerals, advice, or neighborly greetings. If Sogaku had guests, Yone would serve them tea and rice cakes. If he was out, she'd sit with them herself. This was in addition to tending to the children, cooking, cleaning, doing laundry, and other labor-intensive pre-electric tasks. Sogaku made candles for the temple from an iron mold. He would pour extras, and when he had a good load, he would walk 5 miles to Oiso City to sell them. On the way back, he would pick up discarded vegetables from the roadside, storing them in a bag he carried. It wasn't just because he was poor that Sogaku did this. It was his way. His son would talk about it a half-century later. There was a creek in front of my father's temple and many rotten old vegetables would float down from higher up in the mountain. Farmers and other people would throw them away. They were vegetable-like things, not exactly vegetables. They might have been good for compost, not for eating, but as soon as he'd find them, he'd cook them up and say, "Everything has Buddha nature. You should not throw anything away." Wherever he went, he talked about how valuable food is and how you shouldn't throw it away. Sogaku also raised pigs to supplement the family income, a rather shocking thing for a priest to do. But Japanese Buddhism in general, and Soto Zen in particular, have not been known for strict vegetarianism. In a 1971 talk, Shunryu Suzuki remembered the pigs. Buddha is always helping you, but usually we refuse Buddha's offer. For instance, sometimes you ask for something special. This means that you are refusing to accept the treasures you already have. You are like a pig. When I was young, as my father was very poor, he raised many pigs. I noticed that when I gave the pigs a bucket of food, they would eat it after I went away. As long as I was there, they wouldn't eat it, expecting me to give them more food. I had to be very careful. If I moved away too quickly, they would kick the bucket over. I think that is what you are doing. Just to cause yourself more problems, you seek for something, but there is no need for you to seek for anything. You have plenty, and you have just enough problems. This is a mysterious thing, you know, the mystery of life. We have just enough problems, not too many or too few. Born in Kakegawa near Hamamatsu in Shizuoka Prefecture, Sogaku was from a poor farming family that for generations had also made bamboo stretchers for dyeing cloth. Despite being the eldest son, he left home as a young teenager to be ordained as a Buddhist monk and to become the disciple of a Soto Zen priest named Gyakushitsu Sojun. Sogaku left the responsibility of providing for the family to his younger brother. Not that he was leaving home for an easier or more prestigious life. He must have been dedicated and determined, because by the time he was ordained, the Meiji era, 1868 to 1912, had begun, and Buddhism was no longer in favor with the planners of Japan's future. Yone Shima, daughter of a priest from Hamamatsu, had been divorced by her first husband for being too independent. She married Sogaku Suzuki just after the turn of this century. When they met, Sogaku was living not far to the north in the town of Mori, in a fine old temple named Zounin, where he had been abbot since April 1891. Not long after the wedding, he got into a squabble with some of the temple elders over a matter concerning temple lands. A layman who had helped conduct the affairs of the temple had sold off a tract of land without consulting with Sogaku or the temple elders. There was disharmony. Sogaku was embarrassed, feeling compelled to take responsibility for the discord. He resigned and moved with his wife back to a lesser temple where he'd been before. That temple was Shoganji, and that is where he and his family would live in a sort of exile for 26 years. Before Toshi was born, Sogaku had planted plum trees on the temple grounds. The boys, Yoshinami and Toshi, would help care for the vegetable gardens, prune the ornamental trees, and tend to the plants around the temple. They would sweep the leaves from the walks around the temple and clear the pathways of the mortuary Ohaka, full of memorial stones standing behind offerings of flowers, burnt down incense sticks, and cups of evaporating sake. Toshi especially liked to help his father move stones into place around the temple and in the rock garden. He was friend to stones, rivulets, plants, beetles, worms, and butterflies. He'd sit beyond the oak trees on the low stone fence around the Ohaka at dusk, waiting for foxes, tanuki, Japanese raccoons, deer, and rodents. Massaging his mother's back in the evening, he told her and his siblings of his plans to build a zoo next to the temple. He wanted a train from the town below to run up to it so that many people could come visit the animals. In spring, when the rice fields were flooded and the frogs' ubiquitous croaking filled the air, children would dally and play on their way home from school. Some of the boys liked to catch frogs, insert straws into their anuses, and blow them up till they popped. When he first saw this, Toshi flew into a rage. But that didn't help. The other boys were all bigger than he. So he devised a scheme. As soon as school was out, Toshi would be off and running ahead with a long stick, knocking at the banks of the rice paddies, yelling and trying to scare his amphibious friends into hiding. Tadaima kaerimashita. I'm back now. Sogaku would put his bag down, tip his body forward politely, and call this out when he returned home in the evening. O kaeri nasai, welcome home, everyone within earshot would call back. His wife and children would come to the entryway. Sometimes he brought sweets, which Toshi was particularly fond of, and occasionally there was a special surprise, like ribbons for the girls. Every little treat the children got, every piece of clothing they had to wear, they cherished. They appreciated it when, after a heavy winter snow, their father went down to school to walk them home. They loved it on a hot summer afternoon when he filled the outdoor iron bathtub with cold water for them to play in. And sometimes he would have a special gift for Toshi. The skirt-like garment of the samurai is called a hakama. Boys wore hakama for special ceremonies at school. Toshi's mother hadn't found time to make him one, so he felt left out on ceremonial days. In December of 1912, there was to be a very important ceremony which marked the most significant historical event of Toshi's life up to that point. Emperor Meiji had died, and there would be a ceremony at Toshi's school to welcome the new emperor and his era, Taisho, Great Righteousness. The day before the ceremony, Sogaku came home with a new hakama for his son. Excited, Toshi put it on just as he'd seen his friends do. Sogaku insisted he'd done it incorrectly and retied the sash in a formal and old-fashioned way. None of the boys did it that way. Next morning, as soon as he passed through the temple gate, Toshi stopped and rearranged his hakama. Then he heard something behind him. Turning, he saw his father furiously running toward him, waving a stick. Toshi ran away as fast as he could. Toshi grew up in an atmosphere rich in ceremony, custom, and lore that defined the rules of life. Buddhist temples, Shinto shrines, schools, and families preserved and passed on stabilizing rituals that punctuated the year. Shoganji was alive with activity during the week of the Obon ceremony in late summer, when the spirits of the departed are said to return to earth. New Year was a special delight to Shunryu. He spoke of it with great fondness in his later years. On New Year's Eve, temple members and neighbors would come to strike the large bell. Sogaku would greet them, reciting with a robust voice a poem he had written for the occasion in classical Chinese style, and they'd make glutinous rice mochi. Children and parents took their turns with mallets, pounding the mochi in a hollowed tree stump till late at night. The next day, the children put mochi rice balls on tree branches and at the main altar. Sogaku and Yone offered mochi balls stacked in pyramids on red and black lacquer trays. Inside, the oil lamps and a wood fire in the kitchen made the air taste smoky. The children helped in the rite of renewal by collecting old decorations, small shrines, offerings, paper lanterns, and unneeded temple records. With their parents, they took these old things to the neighborhood Shinto shrine on January 1st. There, everything was piled high and mixed with what others had brought from their homes. Then on the night of the 14th day, they went to the shrine for a bonfire, burning last year's memories away and baking rice balls near the flames. At bedtime, Yone enriched the celebrations by telling the children folk tales and Buddhist legends from Japan, China, and India. As the time of the New Year's bonfire approached, she'd have their wide-eyed attention as she told of the deity who came to check up on everyone. He looked over the records of the past year, intending to turn his wrath on those who had broken the rules. But he could find no proof of any wrongdoing. The old had been burned away, and the people couldn't be punished for what they'd done. "Oh, I'm sorry," Yone would say to the wrathful deity. "We burned it all, so you can't check up on us. We'll try to be good this year. We'll be very careful. Come back next year." Snuggled up in the evening with his brother and sisters, Toshi often asked his mother to repeat a story about a famous mythical Japanese warrior, a story he would pass on to his students, his Dharma children, 60 years later. People may say that the Japanese are very tough, but that is just one side of the Japanese personality. The other side is softness. Because of their Buddhist background, they have been trained that way for a long time. The Japanese people are very kind. My mother used to sing a song that described a hero called Momotaro, the Peach Boy. An old couple lived near the riverside. One day the old woman picked up a peach from the stream, and out of the peach came Momotaro. He was very strong, but kind and gentle, the ideal Japanese folk hero. Without a soft mind, you cannot be really strong. My life at school was not so happy, so I preferred staying in the classroom rather than playing in the schoolyard. Sogaku knew that Toshi was having a hard time at school. The other boys slapped him on top of his bald head whenever his father shaved it, and they made jokes about his being the son of a priest. So Sogaku sat him down and told him about the Haibutsu Kishaku, the persecution of Buddhism during the Meiji Restoration. Haibutsu Kishaku means throwing out Buddha, breaking Shakyamuni. In 1858, about the time Sogaku was born, Japanese crowds were overwhelmed by the sight of Commodore Perry's black ships in Tokyo Bay. Within a few years, the ruling elite had made radical changes in policy. They decided to make Japan into a modern industrial nation-state along the lines of a European constitutional monarchy. A new all-Japanese state religion was needed. Shinto, their omnipresent, mythical, ancient animism, was the only candidate. Thus, a nouveau Shintoism was created, with the emperor at the human apex of creation, regarded far more seriously as a living god than ever before. Buddhist influence was largely squeezed out. In addition to being the titular head of Shinto, the emperors had been Buddhist for 1,300 years. Now the emperor was elevated to a position that was far higher and exclusively Shinto. Buddhist temples and Shinto shrines had had a close relationship for most of that period, but suddenly Buddhism was represented as foreign and contemptible, and there was a period of heavy persecution. It was an attack on the heart of Japanese culture. Buddhist priests, however, weren't totally innocent victims. Buddhist temples had been an integral part of the shogunate government apparatus, involved with the education of the samurai and nobles. The priests had been the census takers. If anyone wanted to know about a family's background, to learn, for instance, if they were etta, untouchables, their record could be checked at the Buddhist temple. So Buddhism was associated with the old order. The leaders of the Meiji Restoration declared that the old class system, in fact a caste-like system, would be eliminated to be replaced by social equality. The result was not equality, but a shift in power, and Buddhist priests and temples bore the brunt of this shift. In ancient India, Buddha had rejected the caste system, and now, ironically, Buddhism would suffer because it had supported a caste system in Japan. Temples lost land to shrines, and during the worst year, 1868, thugs roamed around burning temples and killing priests. To this day, decapitated stone Buddhas populate cemeteries as relics of the violent anti-Buddhist rages of that year. Soto Zen, one of the largest sects, although associated more with farmers than aristocrats, didn't escape this purge. Buddhism in Japan had been subject to the designs of political leaders for centuries. Priests had been living luxurious lives in the Edo Tokugawa era, 1600 to 1867. Buddhism needed a house cleaning, and the Meiji era provided a harsh one. It produced strong, noble Buddhist priests because there was no status in the position. They had to be firmly committed and ready to endure suffering. The tremors of the Haibutsu Kishaku were still being felt during Toshi's boyhood. His father's historical explanation of the disrespect for Buddhism helped him to understand why he was treated badly by some of his friends. One of the stories his father told was about a temple near his own former temple in Mori. It had a large Shinto shrine on its grounds. The Buddhist gate was burned along with the ancient guardian deity statues, and the title to the land was given to the shrine. The caretaker priest of the shrine, who had been caretaker of both the temple and the shrine, was ordered by the government to make a bathhouse where the temple had been. He did so, and the governor came to take a bath. As he departed, the priest said to him, "Isn't it refreshing to bathe in a Buddhist Shinto bathhouse?" Buddha is so kind to make this unusual bath for you. I am amazed at his mercy. This frightened the governor, and when he went blind a week later, everyone said it was because he had treated Buddhists so severely. He went to the Buddhist temple of Aburayama, known for healing hot springs, and bathed in the waters and prayed for forgiveness and the return of his sight. My father told me this kind of story once in a while. Being young, I was very much impressed. I couldn't have a normal life, since my friends sometimes made fun of me. Some lay people made fun of monks and young trainees, and I saw them as my enemies. There were so many people who did not respect Buddhism. The government's policy was to weaken Buddhism and promote Shinto as a national religion. I think that is when I made up my mind to be a priest. But not the usual kind of priest. I wanted to be an unusual priest who could tell people what Buddhism is and what the truth is. I wanted to be good enough to give lectures, so I determined to be a good priest. At elementary school, Toshi had a teacher he greatly admired who encouraged him to be strong and to rise above sentimentalism. Toshi had doubts about being ordained by his father, who had no monks in training anymore. His father, though very dear to him, seemed a little weak. He often complained about losing his temple, saying he never should have left, and he was too attached to his son. Toshi just couldn't see him as a teacher. My father took care of me too well. So here in my heart, I always felt some family feeling, too much emotion, too much love. My teacher at grammar school warned me about this kind of thing. He always said, "You should be tough." Shunryu was always at the top of his class. His teacher told him that he should grow up to be a great man, and that the way to be a great man was not to avoid difficulties, but to use them to develop one's greatness. He said there were no great people in that area because the local people wouldn't go to Tokyo and study hard, didn't have the courage to leave. He said if we wanted to be successful, we had to get out of Kanagawa Prefecture. So I determined to get out. Toshi had made the first two critical decisions of his life by age 11, to become a monk and to leave Kanagawa. My ambition at that time was directed toward a narrow idea of attainment, but I made up my mind to leave my home and to practice under a strict teacher. He had been impressed by a popular Buddhist belief that by being ordained, one saves one's ancestors for 9 generations back. But where should he go? With whom should he study? It was March 1916, and he had just graduated from elementary school. This was the time when a boy's career was often decided, when he became an apprentice in a trade, began military school, or some other training, or started working with his father in the fields. Very few went on to higher education, especially in that region. While it was normal for Toshi to follow in his father's profession, it was unusual that he decided to go far away before his parents were ready to let him go, not even choosing to start with his father and move on later. While Toshi was considering these matters, Shoganji had a visitor, a priest who came several times a year to pay his respects to his master, Sogaku. Gyokujun Soon Suzuki, Sogaku's adopted son, had just become the abbot of Zonin, Sogaku's former temple. He was like an imposing uncle to Toshi, tall, tough, exuding confidence. Toshi was enamored with him. I knew him pretty well and liked him so much. When I asked him to take me to his temple, he was amazed, but said it would be fine with him. I asked my father if I could go to Shizuoka Prefecture with him. He agreed, so I went to my master's temple when I was 13. Toshi was actually 11, almost 12 at the time. He calculated 13 by the pre-war counting method, wherein a person was 1 at birth and 2 on the following New Year's Day. Although Toshi felt he was making these decisions on his own, discussions had been going on behind the scenes for quite some time. His intentions and those of his parents were in accord, except for the timing. They thought he was too young to go and suggested he wait until the next year. But Toshi wanted to go right away. He pointed out that his father, Sogaku himself, had chosen to begin apprenticeship with his master at a young age. Toshi wanted to do the same. It all happened so quickly that to his sisters and half-brother, it seemed he was being whisked away from the family. Sogaku and Yone did not want to spend the rest of their lives at Shoganji. It was right that Son, as the first disciple, would inherit Zonin from Sogaku. If Toshi did well with him, he could inherit Zonin from Son. And then Sogaku and Yone could retire there. If Toshi's father ordained him and became his principal master before he left, then Son would become his second teacher, and Toshi wouldn't be in line to get Zonin. Sogaku was too old to train Toshi anyway, and many believed that a father could not properly train his son. As the proverb went, if you love your child, send them on a journey. So, Toshi went off with his first master, Gyokujun Soon, at the age of 11. Comments on Crooked Cucumber, The Life and Zen Teaching of Shunryu Suzuki, Chapter 1, Childhood. Now, after the quote from Suzuki Roshi, the first line of Chapter 1 starts, high winds blew across the green hillside, driving rain into the storm doors of Shoganji. So I wrote that first line because of a letter that Graham Petchy received on August 31st, 1998. August 1990, gosh, the book just came out, a few months, August, September, October, November, December, January. The book came out like 5-6 months after that. Wow. So Graham, who was one of Shunryu Suzuki's early and very important disciples who you will be hearing a lot about, and he and his wife, Hideko, Graham lived in Japan many years, and he and his wife, Hideko, go back some. So they received a letter from Toshikazu Yasui. I'm sure it's somebody they knew from there, and they talked about how this book was happening. I don't remember how this came about, but Graham lived in Sebastopol. I lived in Sebastopol, north of San Francisco. We lived walk over to his house near there, and he and I were very, very close and remained close until a few years ago when he died. So the letter said, Dear Mr. Graham, now, not sure how close they are because of the greeting, but Japanese, especially some older Japanese, can be very formal. So, Dear Mr. Graham and Mrs. Hideko Petchy, I went to National Diet Library. The Diet is the Japanese Congress, very much like our Senate and House of Representatives, directly elected. I found the newspaper of May 18th, 1904. It's difficult to read completely for me because of old-style Japanese. I sent the Chigasaki Weather Station meteorological statistics by email, and I received your return mail, but I couldn't open the attached file. I sent the meteorological statistics with the newspaper in this mail again. Sincerely, Toshikazu Yasui. The data he sent, it's copied. My gosh, and it's all in English. How do you get that? Well, Japan did a lot of science stuff in English. But anyway, on the line that says remarks, I mean, it has weather, precipitation, air temperature, barometer, all sorts of stuff. But under remarks, well, all of these are divided, they divide the day into 6 4-hour segments. And under remarks, it has 3 of those segments from 2 a.m. to 2 p.m. listed for May 18th, 1904, when Shunryu Suzuki was born. 3 of those say rain, strong wind. So when I wrote that line, high winds and rain, strong rain, blah, 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 I had a 50% chance of being correct. Oh, I want to say one thing about Chigasaki. Obviously, that's what they called the area that Shoganji was in. It's a name I heard nowhere else. I've seen nowhere else but there. One change that I made to the text as a result of of what I learned through communicating with people on the Japanese translation is I wrote in the book that Shoganji was located in the village of Tsuchisawa, which was above Hiratsuka, the town of Hiratsuka, which is not far from Yokohama and Kamakura. And they corrected it to Shimokichisawa. Now, I don't know exactly why. I know I did hear Tsuchisawa, probably from the abbot of Shoganji. Also, there was an old name and a new name, so now I'm saying Shimokichisawa like they did, but I'm not quite sure why. There's a whole section on Cuke.com on Shoganji. A lot of photos taken by Bill Schwab, who's a dear friend who lives in the San Francisco Bay Area. He's a professional photographer and a very successful and wonderful sculptor. He's married to Reiko, a Japanese woman who makes beautiful, elegant pottery. I used to know in Kyoto back in when I was living in Japan between 88 and 92. They met Hoitsu and Chitose Suzuki, Shunryu Suzuki's son and Dharma heir in Japan and heir to his temple. They met him at Green Gulch. I got them together, and then they went and visited the temple. And he took pictures of all 3 temples Suzuki was involved with. Suzuki was involved with a lot more than 3 temples. He took pictures of the 3 temples where Suzuki lived, Shoganji and then later Zonin, and then finally Rinso-in. If you go to Cuke.com and just write Shoganji in the site search box, Shoganji, you'll go to a page for it, and you'll see a lot of Bill's photos. They're black and white. They're very beautiful. Also, Graham Petchy's son, Mark, was there in 1998, and he did a video of the temple. So there's a great deal on that temple there. Now, one interesting thing is, so who's been there? I've been there. Mark went there, Graham's son, and Bill has been there. Howie Suzuki told me that when his father was dying, he asked Hoitsu to go to that temple where he was born. And Hoitsu told me he'd never done it. You know, maybe he has by now. I mentioned Fred Harriman in the comments on the introduction. He was the 3rd translator I used, and he was really brilliant, and he had a lot of in-depth knowledge about Japan, Japan's culture, the area, very particular things about the area and the people, and he was very helpful. I spent an hour with him and his wife, Takako, on the phone just a couple of days ago, so he's going to be assisting me in the comments from a letter Fred Harriman sent on October 28th, 1995, on the background of Shunryu Suzuki's family. Suzuki Roshi before 1900. We're talking about the grandfather of Suzuki Roshi and his household. They're from Katagawa, which is an Enshu town. It's the region between the Ori River and Hamana Lake in the prefecture of Shizuoka. The western part of Shizuoka Prefecture, one of the three regions of the prefecture, and it is basically where Suzuki Roshi made his home. Mori, where he trained with Son, is in Enshu. So is Hamamatsu. It's the main city of that area. Hamamatsu-han, or domain, a term used in the Edo period, the Tokugawa era. It's where Tokugawa Ieyasu began his career as a feudal lord under Nobunaga. Shunryu Suzuki's father was born in Katagawa. It's an old Enshu city with a proud samurai tradition, and like all of the cities of that area, from Hamamatsu to Shizuoka, they were all known for textile production. So it would be a good business to provide the tools of dyeing cloth, such as shinshi, the stretchers for cloth used in the dyeing or batiking. So this would be a household that was a shinshiya. They manufactured and sold shinshi, and obviously had done it for a few generations at least, and that is where Suzuki Roshi's father, Sogaku, came from. He was the older son of that family, and the older son would normally take over the business. For him to not have taken over the business and to have become a priest, there must have been some reason. Mori is also kind of a holy place for the Enshu region. It's also known for tea and things like that, but it's a refuge and holy place. There's a very beautiful Shinto shrine there, and Mori is known as one of the centers of religious activity in the area. No one mentions his mother, her background. No one seems to think it's important, but they said she prepared cloth for the garments when he was ordained. She came from Hamamatsu, which was also a textile place. She could have come from a textile family. Suzuki Roshi's father could have met her because of a business connection between her parents and his parents. In those days, they'd look for a political arrangement. Not being from Kakegawa, she's from Hamamatsu, there must have been some reason. That's quite a trek in those days. It would take a day to walk there. They did have a train by then, by 1870 or something. I really enjoyed talking to Fred about all this. And one thing we went over was the title of the book. So I talked to him more about the Japanese title being Magata Kyuri, when we're pretty certain it was Heibo Kyuri. Magata is a more humorous, acceptable term. Yeah, it's sort of funny, and it's a more literal translation, just regular crooked cucumbers. Heibo is not a nice word. Remember that Hoitsu explained to me it was the Heibo Kyuri would be the little tiny cucumber at the end of the twisting vine. Useless, it's a runt. And Fred even said it could imply being a creep. Fred really has a more nuanced understanding of Japanese culture, but I have a lot of experience with it too, so I really got more sympathetic. One thing is that they're so different from us, like shame and embarrassment and what the neighbors think is so much more important there, and social pressure. Hoitsu could tell me that it was Heibo Kyuri, but he didn't for a long time, not until after the book came out, and I think he held that up on purpose. Maybe. But it's, Fred said it's just too embarrassing to use it in the title of a book. The members of the temple and the neighbors will see it. It's just too much, too strong. So I got more sympathetic talking with Fred about that. The actual relationship between Suzuki and his master is explained in the book and comes through later anyway. You know, along those lines, when I was doing interviews of people there, the family didn't want me talking to people in the neighborhood. They didn't want me finding out who to talk to. They only wanted me to talk to people they introduced me to. But I did go out into the neighborhood and started to talk to people, and I talked to several people who were very helpful and gave me information quite different from what I had been hearing. And really, a lot of it, some of it was very positive, and some of it was maybe a little embarrassing about someone and this and that. But this thing about what will the neighbors say, I want to tell you something that I experienced teaching English in Japan. My best class, who spoke pretty good English, were people who lived in Okayama, where I lived, next door to Sogenji, there instead with Shoto Harada Roshi there. There were two women who came to the class from the other side of the hill there. Pretty big hill, wonderful forest, go hiking in it, beautiful trails. Very few people there. People were afraid to go walking by themselves, a lot of them, in a place that's so safe. It's amazing. They tended to like to walk in big groups. Over the hill there, these two women, one day in class, they I asked them what was happening, and they said, well, they had decided to pass a petition around in their neighborhood asking that the government horn not blow when it did in the morning, in the afternoon, in the evening, or they wanted to change the times or something because it was really a nuisance. It was extremely loud. So they were going to go around with the petition and get people to sign it. So the next week I asked them how that was going, and they said, well, they decided not to do it. And I said, why? And they said, well, what if someone disagrees? One thing Fred said in what he wrote, now this isn't interviews I did, this is interviews that were done earlier by Peter and Jane Schneider and Carl and Fumiko Bielefeld back soon after Suzuki Roshi died. And he said it didn't seem important to talk about the mother. That could be because the people they were interviewing were thinking in terms of the patrilineal, and that's what's important. But it could be that the people before them thought that way so much that they really didn't have much information about the mother, and most of the information was about the father. Fred pieced together what he could about that, so he gave us some good information on the mother, too. I want to say something about the quotes, Shunryu Suzuki quotes that are used in the book. Now, I'm reading them pretty straight, right? But that's not what they sounded like coming out of him. And, the English wouldn't be perfect. The pronouns would all be screwed up. He'd shift from I, you, we, they, he, she, get it all mixed up when he was talking. The pronouns, but we knew what he was talking about. And also he laughed a lot. He had a very pleasant, warm delivery. I can't do that. I'll play you a little bit of him, but that's the best I could do. In the quote where he says, there was a creek in front of my father's temple and many old rotten vegetables would float down from higher up the mountain. Farmers and other people would throw them away. They were vegetable-like things. Not exactly vegetables. Well, right then he starts laughing in the quote. And actually the book has laughing in brackets, but that's not going to work for me I don't want to stop and say he was laughing when he said that. So anyway, just know that.
There was small river in front of the temple. So many rotten old, getting down from the upper river. So as soon as he finds some vegetable-like thing, not exactly. For me, that was not exactly vegetable. It might be good for campus, but not for eat. But he cooked it. And he said, everything has Buddha nature. You should not throw away. And wherever he goes, he talked about how valuable the food is. You should not throw them away.
And you can go listen to most of these lectures if you want to on ShunyuSuzuki.com or on the Zen Center site. I link to the Zen Center site if you go to ShunyuSuzuki.com. Then on page 8, Suzuki starts talking about Momotaro, the story of Momotaro, which in English is usually translated as the Peach Boy. Taro's a popular male name in Japan, Taro, and so it really means peach taro. But Peach Boys, that's better for English. Oh, I was familiar with that story before I went to Japan, and Elin and I lived in the Okayama area. Well, Okayama is a prefecture, and we lived in the city. But Okayama sort of claimed the Peach Boy and the Peach Boy's story. So, they made a big deal out of it for tourism and this and that. And there's an island near there that they associate with it, Megijima Island in the Seto Inland Sea, the Seto Naikai. That's right there where we lived. And the Seto Ohashi, the Seto Bridge, that was the longest suspension bridge in the world at the time. It opened when I was there, and it cost $40 just to go one way on it, but it had a train too. So if you wanted to go to the other side, if you wanted to drive, if there were 4 people in the car, that would make sense. But the train was fine, and that went over to Shikoku. Megajima it's closer to Shikoku, and it's near Takamatsu, the big city there. I looked it up in Wikipedia, and it said, there is now a popular notion that Momotaro is a local hero of Okayama Prefecture, but this claim was invented in the modern era and not accepted as consensus in scholarly circles. So, the way Suzuki told it, Momotaro's parents go to a creek and she finds a peach and he comes out of it. Well, the peach they find was taller than they were. So it wasn't any normal peach. Anyway, it's a wonderful story. On page 8, we bring up Suzuki talking about how his father told him about the Haibutsu Kishaku, the persecution of Buddhism during the Meiji Restoration. And in it, I say, Haibutsu Kishaku means throwing out Buddha, breaking Shakyamuni. Then I say, Shakyamuni, Buddha's given name. And that's wrong. That's a mistake. That's an errata I just discovered. Always discovering errata over 20 years later. Every now and then a new one comes in. No, that's not Buddha's given name. That's a title, meaning sage of the Shakyas. And Shakya is where he came from. So he's Shakyamuni, the sage from the Shakyas. His given name, I guess, would be Gautama. He was Gautama Siddhartha. And I'm not sure how they did names, but maybe Siddhartha was his given name and Gautama was I don't know. And There's an airplane going overhead, so the airport isn't totally closed, but there's fewer planes now. Then on page 10, sort of at the end of Suzuki talking about Haibutsu Kishaku, he brings up a temple located near the Mori Temple, Zonin, a story there. He doesn't say the name of it. It's the one that they burned down and then put a bathhouse in, and the governor went there, and then a week later he went blind. I wonder if that's really true. You know, stories can, somebody can say something like that and you know, it can become sort of like legend in the area, but doesn't matter. So the name of that temple, and it's very well known in that area, is Hatasan. It was a Tendai temple that owned the little Jinja shrine there, and then due to the Haibutsu Kishaku, it became a Shinto shrine, that area. And so Suzuki said in his talk in 1969 that it was still a Shinto shrine, and maybe it is, and maybe I don't understand, but when I look online, I see only that it's a temple again. And it's called one of the two most famous temples in the area, along with Katsuisai, which Suzuki was involved with later. Maybe there's more to it than that, but that's what I found out. On page 9, right before the story of that temple that burned down, in talking about Haibutsu Kishaku, that the government eliminated the caste system in Japan, are the four social classes: samurai, artisans, farmers, and merchants. And you couldn't move out of it. That's why I called it a caste system. I'm not sure how the aristocrats and priests fit into that. That was for the Tokugawa era. I think the Tokugawa shogunate created that. They also, like in India, had an outcast group called Etta, or sometimes called Burakumin, which means village people. Like, remember the band, Village People? And I never was real wild about them. So it says the priests had been the census takers, and if anyone wanted to know about a family's background, to learn, for instance, if they were Etta, untouchables, their records could be checked at the Buddhist temple. Well, not only if they were Etta, but if they had any connection to Etta, like it's a bigger deal than that. I had a neighbor in Okayama tell me that if any one of her children married somebody who was Etta, that none of her children would be able to get married then except to Etta. That would just taint the entire family. It's a really big deal. So I would imagine they didn't use that word in the translation in Japan, because I know they didn't use it later. So I was talking to Fred about that, and I said, well, maybe it's something like the N-word is to us. I know where I grew up in Fort Worth, Texas. Now, I've spent time back then in Mississippi in the South, and I was and New Orleans, and then further in the South. And so I've met some really hardcore racism in my youth. Not so much in Fort Worth, where I came from. I'd say there was just softcore racism. I mean, there definitely was, but it wasn't the virulent type. I mean, it depends on the person. I knew one girl whose older brother did not want her to have any record albums with black singers on it. And it's like all of us were just totally getting into the black music then. That's when it was happening, you know. It started coming out in the 50s and the 60s. In my home, the N-word never used. It was considered ignorant and rude and bad taste. You did not use it. None of my friends used it. After a while later on, we started hearing the N-word used constantly in black culture, in black music, in black, movies and this and that. I tried to use it that way a few times with not successful results, and I backed off, and I was embarrassed. It was no good. I can't do that. So anyway, so I said, well, maybe it's like that. And Fred said, no, it's worse than that. A very minor change that I just thought I'd mention on page 9, Suzuki said, I said he was treated badly by some of his friends. I changed that to schoolmates. Now, Suzuki said friends too in his quote, but I really think he meant schoolmates, not friends. The picture he painted, he didn't really have friends back then. He had family, and he didn't start talking about friends till he becomes a young monk, and the other young monks, and he had some real camaraderie, and then he started experiencing it in school. Had no problem socially. It was just when he was very young that he had those problems. On page 10, there's that quote where he had that teacher that impressed him so much that said, don't fall into sentimentalism, and you've got to be tough, and you got to get out of this area. It was a very influential teacher he had. He says, at some point he says that he didn't feel it was quite right, the feeling he had at home. There was too much love. Now, I'm certain that there would be some people hearing that who would think, too much love. What's wrong with him? Again, it's, how do we take that? The word love has just so many different levels and meanings. I think the word sentimentalism that he used tells us what he's talking about. And if we look, again, I mentioned in the prior commentary about the Abhidharma, I think I did, and how there were wholesome and unwholesome dharmas. Dharmas being like all the things and everything that all phenomena and non-phenomena are divided up into, and how pity was unwholesome but compassion was wholesome. I think he's talking about how he realized he had fallen into an unwholesome type of love, and that he wanted to have a wholesome type of love. But he didn't use the word love much, very little, every once in a while. And, he would even say, I don't really feel much love. But what he felt was it radiated out, and it was good. And people who met him almost universally felt it and really liked being around him. At the end of that chapter, when he said he was 13 when he left home, and I said, well, actually, he was 11 and almost 12. He left, very soon before his 12th birthday, and I assumed he was making the mistake of using the old age counting, which is like racehorses, incidentally. They become a year older on January 1st. Also, you're one at birth. I don't know if racehorses are one at birth, but the old Japanese way of counting is you're one at birth, and frequently talking to people about age. People get confused on that. I state this very definitely in the book, but I spent a long time on that, talking to people about it, looking at interviews. And so there was a lot of thought went into that. And I did not want to share my doubts or the process with the reader. That's too much. I wanted to give them something definite. And then the line where it says, if you love your child, send them on a journey. The book says, if you love your child, I'm not reading it, so it's either this or very close to this. If you love your child, send him on a journey. I use that in the book because I was just quoting, what I read. But more and more, I started a long time ago using they and them for indefinite pronouns. So when I read it now, and in my corrected transcript for Crooked Cucumber, I said, send them on a journey. If you love your child, send them on a journey. Kawai no ko tabi o saseru. Oh, that neat birdie was out there. I don't know what it looks like. I don't know what type of bird it is. It was out back in a tree in the neighbor's yard that's behind us, and you can hear a little bit coming from them and a squeaky door. Here's what it sounds like. May all beings be happy. May all beings be healthy. May all beings be free from harm. May all beings love life. May all beings awaken. Well, that wraps it up for Cuke Audio Podcast for today. Thank you for joining us. Come back next Tuesday and we'll get together again. And if you want to help keep Cuke Audio going, just go to cuke.com, cuke.com, and there's a donate link near the top and on the bottom of the page. It's also linked to from the Podbean page. We'd love for you to become a subscriber via PayPal. How about $1 a month? There is a minimum, though. It's $0. And if that's all you can set aside for Cuke, just mail an empty envelope or blow us a kiss. We're somewhere out there in cyberspace. Take care of yourself. And don't let that nasty virus get near you or your loved ones. Till next week, I'm David Chadwick, the Poobah of Cuke Archives and Cuke Audio, with Dogette Bandita and Feline Cuchita, but without dearest lovely Katrinka, wishing you a grand awakening.